Hey guys, this is Carl from Dream Day Digital. Today we're going to talk about contracts with your wedding vendors. Now, you need to remember that going into a contract with a wedding vendor is a business transaction, and you want to make sure that your vendor contracts not only protect your vendor, but protect you as well. You'll be spending thousands of dollars on your wedding on a variety of wedding services, so make sure that your vendor contracts protect the investment of your big day. Now, before we go into detail, I'd like to make a disclaimer. This is not by any means legal advice. That legal advice should be sought out by professional legal counsel. Also, keep in mind that laws tend to vary from state to state and from county to county. Okay, well, now with that said, when you hire, say, your wedding venue, your wedding DJ, your photographer, videographer, wedding planner, etc., make sure you have a contract. Now, you'd be surprised at how many brides and grooms enter into just verbal agreements or promises that were only stated in an email from a vendor with no actual written contract. Now, the law may recognize verbal contracts, but they can be difficult to prove. And this omission could come back to haunt you in the future. So remember, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. Nothing could be worse than if your wedding vendor makes you a verbal promise but fails to deliver the day of the wedding. So learn the lesson to never let a vendor tell you, oh, no problem, I'll remember that, or don't worry, I'll fix that after you sign the contract. With everything going on, they could forget. You'll have little to no recourse for an unkept verbal agreement if it's not in writing. In other words, it's better to not take a chance. So just get it in writing. Another thing you want to make sure of is that if you have a question for your wedding vendor, make sure to ask them. Don't be shy, and be sure not to assume anything. Now, once you feel all of your questions have been answered and that all of the contractual ducks, so to speak, are in a row, you can go ahead and sign your contract. And with a sigh of relief, you can just check that item off your to-do list. Now, when the contract is signed by both parties, make sure you, as well as the vendor, get a copy of it. Okay? A lot of contracts nowadays are just digital, so just make sure you have a digital copy. You can print that off and file it away, just in case. Now, here are some basic things you should be looking for in your wedding vendor contracts. Number one, make sure the wedding vendor has availability for your date, right? Before wasting any time. How many hours also will you need them for? Make sure they're available for that time. To help avoid any last minute snags, I put together a list of everything that should be on your wedding venue contract. At least most of the things. Now, we're going to discuss some basic points that every wedding vendor contract should cover. And I know that some of these might seem like no-brainers, but they are very important nonetheless. Okay. Number one, again, it may seem obvious, make sure your name and the name of the vendor, as well as your contact information and their contact information, are on the contract. Okay. Make sure to at least have your name, maybe the name of your fiance, and or the name of a parent in the contract. I've had lots of parents put their names on contracts. Also, make sure you have the names of the vendors so you know who's providing the service or services. Number two, make sure you have the date of your event and the time frame. For example, getting ready, the ceremony, and the reception. So for your videographer and your photographer contract, you want to make sure to have it in writing what times you'd like them to show up. For example, to get shots of you getting ready and doing your hair and makeup as well. And you may want shots of the groom getting ready as well. So make sure this is included in the time frame of the contract. Now, from my own experience, on an average wedding day, the getting ready pictures will start on average about 2 hours before the actual ceremony. If you're getting ready at the venue, make sure you have plenty of time contracted to show up and get ready before the ceremony. And also make sure that this is in the contract, that the rooms you will be using are in writing so they don't make a switch on you. In addition, make sure there are no other events going on before yours at the venue that would conflict with your preparations. Now, most ceremonies last around a half hour, an hour at the most. Pictures after the ceremony and a cocktail hour normally last just that, an hour. The average dinner and dance reception is approximately 4 hours, sometimes more or less than that. Now, also you want to make sure you to know what time your event professionals will be able to set up. Timing is everything on your wedding day, so you want to make sure that your vendors, for example, the photo booth, your florist, your wedding DJ, can get started when they need to. Okay. Confirm with the venue that your wedding professionals have enough time to arrive and set up with no timing issues. Okay. Also, you want to make sure that your guests are taken care of by making sure that there are enough tables, table placements, chairs at the reception and also at the ceremony. And try to get a layout of the room if possible, as well as the number of guests and the number of tables to be set up. Okay. Now, next, you want to make sure you get an itemized list of what each vendor will provide. Services provided, for example, this should include a detailed description of what you'll be receiving from a vendor. It should go beyond just a general description, but should actually be a detailed description of the business that they'll be conducting. For example, if you're getting photography services, you want to make sure that the getting ready time is in there, that the end time is there, what time they're doing it. Make sure the contract states how many hours, okay, and approximately how many pictures you'll be getting. Sometimes they'll be taking 1,000 pictures and maybe edit half of those. So you want to get a good number of how many pictures you'll be getting. That's a lot. Not everybody does that. Again, all of this may seem like an uncomfortable task, but remember that it's important that you go through the details. For example, request an itemized list from the venue that includes everything they will be providing, and make sure that you're aware of what you're buying and what would be an additional cost. Now, this will minimize the possibility of extra and unexpected fees on your wedding day. Next, get proof of insurance from your vendors and from the bartender or the venue. If they're providing alcohol, make sure you get proof of their liquor license, and don't just take their word for it. Now, make sure both of these are included in the contract so there's absolutely no liability on your part. Also, find out if the venue requires a certificate of insurance or a COI from the wedding vendors who will be serving you on the day of your wedding. Now, this may or may not apply to you, but travel can be something that needs to be addressed. If your wedding is happening outside of a vendor's standard radius of service, what additional costs are expected in order to get them there? Okay. Now, are you agreeing to book or reimburse flights? Are you reimbursing their meals? Are you booking a hotel room for them? Okay. If they'll be driving, will there be a mileage charge? Knowing the answer to these questions is important for budgeting purposes mostly. Now, in regard to your venue, you need to think about setup, cleanup, overtime, and other fees. Well, overtime and other fees could apply to other vendors as well, but we know how important it is to stay on your budget, which is why I insist on getting the detail in writing from your wedding vendors. Now, be aware of any extra fees or costs that may come up so you know exactly what to expect. Okay. And next, we'll talk about payments, balances, and the due dates of these payments. Now, it's always a good idea to have the deposit or retainer due date stated in the contract just so there's no confusion whatsoever. Okay. Also, your contract should spell out all things around payments for goods and services that you're going to receive. You might ask them what do they mean by a non-refundable deposit? When are payment installments due? When are additional payments refundable versus when they're not refundable? What are the overage fees? What are the penalties if you're late on a payment? Now, all of these details, these financial details, you might not want to worry about, but they should be clearly listed out on your contract. Okay. Next, understand vendor meals and accommodations. Now, vendor meals are something some engaged couples overlook, but with weddings being lengthy events, it's proper etiquette to feed your vendors. After all, they're going to be there for a long time, and I know you don't want them passing out in the middle of your wedding. So now, many vendors will include the requirement for vendor meals in their contracts, but venues typically offer a vendor meal option for you as well. And that usually costs less than an actual per person plate for your regular wedding guests. So usually, but be sure to count ahead of time, like how many vendor meals you'll need to provide. And also you make sure your caterer is aware of the number of vendors. You might also ask your vendors if they have any food allergies, if you have options for fish or steak, or if they want vegetarian, things to consider. Other accommodations vendors may include in a contract can include, like we talked about, travel, airfare, but also hotel fees if they're traveling from out of town. Now, some companies charge a gratuity automatically in their contract, but tips may not always be required, but are always appreciated. Next, make sure that there is what we call a contingency clause in the contract. For example, any vendor that is a single provider of services should give you an idea of what were to happen if they were to become sick. Now, that may or may not happen. It's very unlikely. However, it is a possibility, and it's always great to have a backup plan in the event that they do get sick. Now, usually they'll have an associate or backup professional that can take their place, but you'll want to make sure that the plan is clear in the contract, whatever it is. Okay. Next is cancellation and what's their cancellation and refund policy. Sometimes things happen and you have to cancel your celebration. Now, as unlikely as that might be, it does happen. So make sure you know exactly how each vendor handles those situations so you're not surprised in the rare event that it does happen. Here at Dream Day Digital, we can provide you with multiple services: DJ, photography, videography, photo booth rental, uplighting. So if you did need to cancel or change a date, you would just have to make one call to cancel 5 services. But in summary, contracts are tools that can protect your wedding investment, give you peace of mind, and keep your wedding day running smoothly. So trust in them. And remember, get it in writing, read everything, and don't be afraid to negotiate. Okay. A simple contract is always better than no contract at all. Again, this has been Carl from Dream Day Digital. If you like this video, remember to like, share, and subscribe. We also appreciate you sharing this video with anybody, and so we can continue to deliver great content for you. Once again, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.